is about to start. We'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound check, camera check, lights check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Hi, my name is Leonard Facchinetti, and let's write some code together, shall we? What we have on the menu today is to continue looking into parameters. It's going to be a hell of a ride. So to recap for people who are new here, we have been developing real-time audio effects using the JSFX language in REAPER. But most of the concepts that we cover actually transfer to other environments as well. Anyway, in particular, we are developing an audio effect called Auto Mixer, but I don't think we will have a lot of time to talk about the Auto Mixer itself today, so I'm not going to recap that. What we have been looking at in particular is the notion of parameters, the things that you change when you're using an audio effect. So things like threshold, volume, gain, attack and release, those sorts of things. It turns out that parameters like that occur in at least 5 different places in the code. These different places have different responsibilities, of course, and in many cases you want to have some kind of synchronicity between these places. And there are 8 events, 8 things that happen in the plugin, from it being loaded the first time to it being restored from a saved REAPER session and so on. So there are 8 events in the life cycle of a plugin. And we need to go in detail today into each of these events and see how they affect each of the 5 places in which the parameters exist. And we must work our way through all the edge cases and everything that could happen. And then we will try to implement some of these. We'll see. I'm not sure we'll get to the implementation, but we'll get to talk about this a whole lot. Before we start things off, let me say hello to Mage. Hello, it's great to have you here. And Tail. Hello, Tail. What's up? So let's get to business. These are the results of our last session on this topic. The 5 different places and the 8 different actions. A parameter is represented by a JSFX slider. Sometimes there will be derived parameters from, well, some of these other sources, but typically from the sliders. So if the slider is, for instance, a volume in dB, then the derived parameter may be the volume in linear. And in many cases, you will want to serialize and deserialize these parameters in a special way. So there is also the parameter as it's stored in the REAPER project when you save a project. Then a parameter will have a representation in the graphics section, in the user interface that we design. And finally, depending on the parameter, we would like to sync that across plugin instances, so there is a notion of that parameter in the global memory. Let's go through all the 8 events in the life cycle of a plugin and see what needs to happen to each of these 5 places. So when the first instance of the plugin is loaded, the sliders will be in their default state. The default state given by us developers in the code. For instance, this effect that, hang on, where is the effect? I guess it's this. This effect that we have been using to test and understand stuff has one slider. And the first time this effect is loaded, it will have this value, which is the default value set when defining the slider. And the slider used to be the one and only place or the one and only concept we will deal with. But now that we are getting more sophisticated with derived values, user interfaces that are custom and whatnot, the slider became just one facet of the parameter, which is a bigger concept, which encompasses the slider as well as these other faces of the parameter. Right, so that is the value of the sliders on the first loading of the plugin. What should happen to the derived parameters? I think that they need to be computed. So I will mark here as B. These need to be computed. Then, in terms of serialization, there is no work for us to do when the plugin is loaded. There will be some work for us to do when the project is being saved on step 7. Right, so next is the graphics. The graphics notion of the slider needs to be synced because by default, Reaper will start the plugin with the slider with the default value, but it doesn't know about our notion of that parameter. So we need to sync that. So I'm going to say that A is the source of truth for the defined parameters, and A is also the source of truth for the user interface notion of the parameters. So this means that we will use A, the sliders, to compute B and D. And as for the gmem, we are dealing with here, we are considering the case in which the slider is one of these special sliders that is synced across plugin instances. So I would say that global memory also needs to be initialized because to begin with, it will be a bunch of zeros, but we want to initialize that with the values from the sliders, or maybe with some default values. So I will just draw this as coming from the sliders, potentially from some other default value. Now, when you load the second instance of the plugin, or the third or the fourth, what needs to happen? The sliders are no longer the source of truth for the globally synced parameters, for the parameters that sync across plugin instances. Gmem is the source of truth for that. Perhaps it's not super clear what I'm talking about, so let me show you one example. Do you ever watch my streams and wonder what this is? I'm trying to force you to ask a question. Do you ever wonder what this is? Do you ever question yourself? Because I can answer that. I'd love to talk about it. Let me open the work in progress version of the Auto Mixer. It has this whole section of parameters that are synced across plugin instances. Let me show you how that works. When I have two plugin instances, they have these sliders that move together. They also have these sliders that don't move together. And if you know Reaper very well, you may know about parameter syncing or linking, which is here. And then you can link the parameters like this. That's not what's happening. We are not linking this at the Reaper level, we are linking this at the plugin level. And we have this side channel to allow the plugin instances to communicate with one another. So, When you load the second plugin instance, let's reproduce that case that I was explaining. So you have your first plugin instance loading. The source of truth is the default value of the sliders, and it should write to that global memory, which is the side channel that plugins use to communicate with one another. Now let's say that I move the sliders, and then I load the plugin on a second track. Then they belong to the same group, so they will have their parameters synced, which means that these sliders should pick up the values from here via the global memory. So the source of truth in this case is not the sliders, it is the global memory. So from the perspective of this other plugin, I guess there are two kinds of parameters, those that are synced and those that are not. For the parameters that are not synced, the sliders are still the source of truth, because again, Reaper will load these sliders with their default values. So we don't have to do any extra work in this case. I guess it will just follow this same approach. But let's take note of that. So I'll call this regular parameter. We'll do this same policy. And for what I'm calling a global parameter, perhaps, may not be the best name, because global implies that there is really just one of these parameters for the entire Reaper project, and that's not true. At least in the AutoMixer, these are group-wide, and you can have different groups of plugin instances with different parameters. But in any case, perhaps I will call this the synced parameters, because then I'm not making any assumptions in the name as to how many of these are there and if they're grouped or not. So they are sync. Yeah, I know that this is getting a bit difficult to read. What are you going to do? So the synced parameters, we need to do something else. They will need to copy from the global memory into the sliders. And I suppose that we could say the derived parameters are computed from the sliders, just because that will lead to a cleaner code path where we have only one place to compute the derived parameters and they are computed from the sliders. So we are going to copy the gmem into the sliders and then call the routine that computes the derived parameters. So E is copied into A, and A is the source of truth to compute B. And what will happen to the graphics version of that parameter? Again, I think it makes sense to say that it will be copied from the sliders. Just because then this figure looks similar to this figure, the only difference being the position of E. And what about serialize? Same argument as before. Serialize doesn't have to change because we're loading the plugin, not saving the project with the plugin in there. Next, you wiggle the JSFX native slider. You do this. Any of these will do, right? You are changing a parameter via the JSFX native slider. What should happen then? Well, the sliders have been changed directly, so no extra work here. The derived parameters need to be recomputed. This needs to be updated, this needs to be updated, and this doesn't change. So it is exactly the same scenario as this. Let's call this scenario star. we do star. I know. A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, stars. Difficult handwriting. So it goes when you're thinking about a problem and working through it. What happens when you change the value of a slider, not via the native JSFX sliders, but via custom knobs on the user interface? So in this case, we are talking about, for instance, our test effect, where you can use this, of course, but you can also use that. Well, in that case, this is the source of truth. So let's work our way through this case. So the sliders on the JSFX interface need to be updated to reflect D. So D is copied into A. Then the derived parameters can be computed from the sliders. The global memory can be updated from the sliders. And again, serialized is not involved in this scenario. I'll put a circle around the stars, just so it doesn't seem like the star is referring to this diagram. Okay, so far so good. Now, what happens when you do a programmatic change to a parameter? That happens, for instance, on well, I would say that it happens, for instance, when you have a graphics slider, because you're changing the slider, the JSFX sliders programmatically. The truth is that I cannot come up with another example of this. So perhaps let's just say that there is some kind of LFO. You are doing a soft synth. There is some kind of LFO, and that LFO is going to control one of the parameters in the synthesizer. Let's say that it controls the pitch. You're doing some kind of vibrato. So it controls the pitch. And you would be doing a programmatic change to the parameter, that is the pitch, based on the LFO. A programmatic change that does not have to do with the user interface. So what should happen in that case of the LFO? I'm going to put in parentheses here an LFO just to remember that this is the example I'm going off of. The sliders need to be changed, or I guess the sliders have been changed programmatically. But just to remember that there is something special about this case, I will put a different delimiter here on the JSFX sliders. And I think that the way to do a programmatic change should be the sliders, because for the most part, they are the source of truth. In almost every scenario here, they are the source of truth. And if they're not, they are at least the thing you change, and then that becomes the source of truth. So A has been changed programmatically, but then we need to go to B and D and E. Same scenario as here. So I'm going to say that it refers to this change to A, and then you do star. I'm starting to notice a pattern here, even in the cases that don't do star, because so far we are in step 5. So far, 3 of these steps boil down to star. This is star, and that is star. But what I'm noticing is that even the 2 other cases, so cases 2 and 4, don't necessarily do star, but do a variation in it. So there is always this A going into B and D. And E. Yeah, right. So in this case, for instance, when you're updating a GFX slider, it probably would not harm you to update D as well. It probably would not harm you to update E here as well. You would be writing into the global memory something that was already taken from the global memory, so it's kind of silly to do it, but you could. And here you would be updating the graphics notion of a parameter, but that notion came from the graphics itself, so it's kind of silly to do that, but one could if one needed, if one wanted. So I guess I'm gonna put this in a different color. I can imagine there being some issues with this, but it's something that we can consider. And the reason why I perhaps would want to consider this is that then we could have a function to do star and reuse it in all 5 cases, which would be neat. But for completeness, I'm going to mention what are the drawbacks I can imagine. So for instance, here the JFX slider will not be in a one-to-one correspondence to the JSFX slider. Otherwise, we would be using just that variable. The truth is that in the JFX slider, you may click and drag and go in between values. You can see that these volume values are quantized to the dB. You cannot go to 4.5. But internally, this variable that is shown here is actually at 4.5, because you can click and drag and be on your cursor halfway between the position where it is 5 and 4. So it is 4 here and it becomes 5 there, but in between, it could be 4.5. So if we were to actually do this update, we could be overwriting that 4.5 with the 4 because the actual slider, the JSFX slider, has been quantized. Similarly here, we would be writing into the global memory something that came from the global memory, and in this case, I don't think there is any kind of discrepancy like that, but it is a waste to go into the global memory. It's always expensive to go there, and it may be even more expensive to check that we are in this case. And if is also an expensive operation. Yeah, but I don't know. Oh, and Bo is here. Hello, Bo. Great to have you here. Welcome to this hell of a ride that is today's stream. But hopefully something good will come out of it, because we are thinking really systematically about, I really hope, everything that could happen with parameters. Really hope that we are able to just forget about parameters forever and ever. Oh, I just remembered something else that I guess boils down to a programmatic change to a parameter. And that is something that came up 2 days ago in the previous stream. But that is the notion of linking parameters, not across plugin instances, but within the same plugin instance, the example being the limiter that I reviewed for Toucan, for John Matthews. So if you enable Maximizer, these 2 knobs, the limit and the outgain, are linked, they move together. So I am changing the limit knob, but one could argue that there is a programmatic change to this knob, similar to the LFO story I just explained before. Right, and then there is the syncing of global parameters. Well, that is necessary when another instance changed the value from here. And our job is to update everything in our internal notion of that parameter. So in other words, what needs to happen is this graph here. Let's give this one a symbol. This is going to be dagger. And that's what we do in this case. Yeah, in fact, there is a similarity between the notion of I'm a second plugin being loaded, so I need to trust the synced parameters. And the notion of another instance has just changed their slider value. So now I again need to trust that notion of the global parameter, which I'm now calling the synced parameters. Syncing the synced parameters. Right, and then what should happen when we save and close the project? Well, there is not a lot to be done in terms of moving things around. But let's go step by step. The sliders are the source of truth in this case, but they don't need to be copied anywhere. Or I guess they need to be taken in account during serialization. So let's say that in this case we have A going into C. The derived parameters don't need to be computed in that case. This doesn't need to be updated, and this doesn't need to be updated as well. For our effect and purposes, we can pretend that the plugin is going to die. It's going to be closed at any point. So that's all we need to do. When opening and restoring, however, that's much more interesting. What needs to happen in that case is that the serialize will be the source of truth. So it will be copied into A. And from there, we can do star. Yeah, from there we can do star. In other words, we can recompute the derived parameters, copy that into the graphics, and into the global memory. And if we do everything right when it comes to saving and restoring, if we do everything right, then all the plugin instances with the synced parameters will have the same synced parameter. And it does not matter that all of them will write into the global memory. If there is some kind of problem that we can try to simulate by saving a project and then going into a text editor and changing the values of the stored parameters in the text file that represents the Reaper project. If we do that, then different plugin instances will have different notions of the same synced parameter, which is an invalid state to be in. But the only consequence of that would be that the last plugin to be loaded would win, because the last plugin to be loaded would do star, which overrides the global memory. And that's okay. I am okay with that predicament, because you would be losing the internal state of some plugin instances, but well, that's your own silly problem, right? As it's on you. You decided that you would change the text file. Because on our side, we are going to do everything right. And the synced parameters will always be consistent across plugin instances. Let's see what you have to say. Why a hell of a stream? Well, because we are getting very deep, very deep into a topic that is not sexy. We are not doing digital signal processing. We are not even putting buttons on the interface. You're just thinking about hard problems and edge cases, as one needs to do from time to time. Don't forget that for programmatic change of a slider parameter, 4, 5, and 6, 4, 5, and 6, fair enough. If the code wasn't running in the slider block, you need to call slider change or slider automate. That's a great point. So what Mage is pointing out here is that anytime and I guess this is a more general way of thinking about this, is that anytime we are changing the value of a slider programmatically, so anytime that we are writing into A, we will probably want to do start to update all the other facets of the parameter that depend on A, because A, for the most part, is the source of truth in most cases. We also want to call these auxiliary functions, the slider change or slider automate, to tell that that parameter has been modified so that it shows up. For instance, I just played it around with the limit and then threshold shows up here. Not sure why it's called threshold. Probably a leftover from a previous version of the plugin. Yep. Oh well. Anyway, this is something that we are doing right because Mage pointed out. But yeah, we are doing right in this plugin. So if you wiggle this, the volume will show up here. And when when we had John from Toucan Studios over, I asked him about this because I didn't know what they were supposed to do, and he explained to me what slider automate does, which is the thing I just showed. But slider change, I'm still not sure I know what that's for. Do you know what slider change is for? Because slider automate is for this. But slider change, have never used, don't really know what it's for. I wonder if other people were using it. Yep, other people were using it. Still don't know what it does. All right, and Bo has been watching a lot of old streams, very helpful. Oh, that's very nice of you. Thank you. Yeah, people, we are... Can I show this on the screen? Hang on. I'm going to not show my screen for a moment, because I don't know what I can share and what I cannot share from this. Guess I probably should not share this. And yeah, okay, this is safe now. So yeah, my channel is not monetized, but we are getting there. So thanks for watching my old streams, Bo. I appreciate that. And when I finally get into the YouTube Partners program, I will need to learn what happens. If you're watching this and you know the answer to this, then I want to hear from you. The thing is, I don't like advertisements. And I know that for a small channel like mine, it will not bring me much income anyway. So if I can, I will turn off advertisements. But now the question is, what will YouTube do? According to my intuition, it would not show advertisements. According to Arya from IDDQD Sound, you should go check his channel if you don't know him. According to Arya, YouTube will still play advertisements on your videos, but you won't get any money from it because you didn't get into the program. So if that's the case, then yeah, sure, I will turn on monetization because the money's on the table. But ideally, I would not turn on monetization. Yeah, if you know the details and the ins and outs of this, I would love to hear from you. Yes, I notice, and I really appreciate that you are a patron. So Mage is a new patron, and if you're watching this and you're thinking, maybe I should be a patron too. Yes, you should. Go to the link in the description and become a patron. I really appreciate it. All right. Okay, I guess we worked through all the cases. Damn it. Now we'll have to implement all of this. Oh well. I guess the first step is this problem, how to tell these three cases apart, which is a problem we solved on the last session. And Mage was actually the person who gave me the answer to this. And I think that we need to look into this problem a little more, because perhaps we can abstract this into the library so that no one has to worry about this. Let's see if that's a possibility. So this is the example plugin to show us how to tell cases 1 and 8 apart. Actually, those are the most important cases. So we would like to know if we are being loaded straight from the effects browser, if we are the first instance to have been loaded of that plugin at all, or if we are loading from an existing project that has been reopened. And as we learned, there are different things that we want to do in these two cases, so we would love to be able to distinguish between them. And this is what the code looks like. I guess I can simplify it a little bit. No, this is not really a simplification, because it would be getting rid of the whole init section. Yeah, so the init section runs when the plugin is loaded, regardless of whether it was loaded from the effects browser for the first time or from an existing Reaper project. It doesn't matter, the init section will run. What was surprising to me is that the serialize section will run too. That section will run. And it will run in read mode. The serialize section has two modes of operation, write mode and read mode. Read from when you're loading the plugin, write for when you're saving the project with the plugin. So it will run the serialize section even on the first load. And this is the trick. You first have to store something, or I guess since this is a reading scenario, this line will actually be skipped in this situation, I think, because I think that the version will be 100. Won't it? I think it will. Yes, version is 100. So this will run. This will be essentially skipped because we are in read mode, and theoretically this should be reading the version variable from the project file, but there is no project file yet. So this, I think that conceptually we can think of this line as being skipped. And then we have this magic line that is checking. Well, it actually makes sense. File handler number 0 would be the Reaper project, and we are checking, is the file available? As I just explained, it's not, because there is no Reaper project yet. The project has not even been saved. So this file does not exist, which means that this thing will be 0, false. And perhaps there are some error cases in which this would be less than 0, would be a negative number, I don't know. But in the documentation, as well as in Mage's comment, it tells us to compare to 0 like that. So if this variable is set to true, it means that we were reading from an existing Reaper project. We are in situation number 8. And if this is false, we are in situation 1. This is the first instance that has ever been loaded of this plugin. I want to see this in action once again, because seeing is believing. So to begin with, let's get a fresh new project. Just for the sake of it, I'm going to restart Reaper from scratch, because you never know. Then I will add the serialize effect, and hello is 0. That's what we said would happen on the first load. Okay. Then I come back to Reaper, save the project to a temporary folder. Then I will close Reaper, reopen Reaper, reopen that project, look at the plugin, and then hello is 1. And that's the value we expected to see when the project has been loaded from an existing Reaper project. And the plugin has been loaded from an existing Reaper project. So that's how we can tell that we are in step H. This works when you write the code directly in the plugin. Ideally, we would be able to extract this notion into our little library that we have been developing so that people don't have to know about these kinds of incantations. That would be ideal. Let's see how much of this we can bring into the library. In a moment, after these messages. Mage says, I think once you are monetized, you can choose to have a mid-video advert as well as one up front if it's longer than 8 minutes. A useful channel is vidIQ. I don't know that. I should learn about that. What is that? Ah, okay. Yeah, I'll look into this. Well, once I am monetized, I know that mid-rolls are something that you have to enable specifically. So YouTube will not run mid-video roll ads if you don't turn it on explicitly. So that much is okay. I have to not do anything and it will be fine. But that's the question. Do I have control over the pre-roll and the post-roll, the ad that shows up after the video? Do I have control over that? If I don't enable that, will they not show ads? By the way, right now I am not monetized. As you can see, I'm not even eligible for the partnership program. But do you all see ads when you go to my channel and watch streams? Bo, you have been watching some of the old catalog. Are ads being served to you? Unless, of course, you use an ad blocker or you pay for YouTube Premium. But if you don't, then let me know if YouTube ever serves ads on my videos. I don't think it does. I sure hope it doesn't. But we'll see. When I go and watch my own streams to see if the audio is okay, to see what the cameras look like and whatnot, I have never been served any ads, but YouTube knows that I am me, so maybe it's special in that way. Anyway. Oh, so sometimes there are ads? Crap, that sucks. I have a love-hate relationship with YouTube, in case you don't know already. I love the discoverability, I love the distribution, I love that it is free for... You have to watch ads, so it's not free. Anyway, so I like all this, but I really hate this whole thing of not being able to turn off ads, not being able to turn off video recommendations when you're embedding into third-party websites. Super annoying. But they gotta make money, right? It's expensive to do video streaming, so it makes sense. Anyway, I think that slider change is for updating the sliders in the Reaper's UI. That's what the documentation says as far as I remember, but the thing is, I never used slider change and the Reaper UI always updates just fine. At least, for instance, for something like this, it is updating the UI here, and I never had to do any work for this to play out like this. Maybe if it is in like the track controls. Never checked that, I don't think. So now our slider is here. But yeah, see, it's updating just fine. That's very weird. However, this seems to happen already automatically, but I think it wasn't always like this. Maybe. But I am okay with going with the new version. Maybe if you are on an old version of Reaper, you will see some glitches there. I don't care. Update your Reaper. I'm completely fine with using the latest features. Does the serialized data get written into the Reaper project file like MIDI, or is it a separate file for the plugin? It is in the same project. Let's open that project that we created a moment ago. And go to our serialize plugin. And this is probably the version of the plugin because we wrote the version of the plugin. So this is probably that. This, judging by the equal signs, it seems like it's base 64. Base 64, really? Visual Studio Code doesn't know how to do that. Base 64 decode. Fuck. Okay, decode. Oh well, it's binary. Whatever. I thought I was gonna see something like version equals something, you know? No, it's binary. Whatever. Then we should see some of the... Oh, the sliders, they're here. But it so happens that... Yeah, we only have one, so check this out. We only have one slider, that was slider hello, and the value that was stored there was 0, because that's the value of hello on that first save of the project. So 0 here, and I bet that there are 63 of these dashes, because it seems like it's storing the numbers corresponding to the 64 available sliders. We are only using one, but in JSFX you can have up to 64 sliders. And I bet that there are 63 dashes. How many dashes are there? Let's count. On a new buffer, I will paste them. I will find all occurrences of the space. I will change them into a new line, and 63. There you go. So that's how it works. JSFX sliders are serialized like this, and whatever you put into the serialized block, like file var for instance, will be put into this in a binary format, encoded using base 64 most probably. And now you know. It gets written into the RPP file. I think it's base 64 code. And there you have it. It seems like Theo agrees. I never see an ad on YouTube or any other website. Yeah, good for you. I played with ad blockers, and for a couple of years I used them. Then I went into this other strategy of using an Etsy hosts file that would point all the ads websites to localhost. These days, I just watch the ads because you know what? That kind of thing broke so many websites in so many spectacular ways, and then I would have to allow list many websites, including YouTube. Sometimes it wouldn't play the video. Perhaps it has some kind of, if I cannot play the ad, I will not show you the video kind of thing. How well are ad blockers working for you these days? Because I have been out of the ad blocker boat for a couple of years at this point. They did not work very well back then. Let's see how much of this we can extract into the library. My first question is, can I extract this into the library? I don't think I can. I think I remember trying this before and it did not work. Particularly because this version variable needs to be available on the init section. The whole point of this, in case you don't know, is for me to store this version of the plugin in the plugin data in the Reaper project, so that if the plugin gets updated in a way that is not backwards compatible, I can do some sort of migration in the init block. Let's explore this concept for a moment. So right now I'm in version 100. Suppose that I am now checking for this. And I will say that, for instance, hello is 2. For whatever reason, the migration will be to change this slider to be the number 2. Or maybe some other slider. Let's do another slider. The migration slider will be the number 1. So what needs to happen is, well, I guess let's pretend that we are in an old version of the plugin. So let's comment this out and let's comment this out. Those are the lines that we have added. So if I save this, now we are in the old version of the plugin. I will close Reaper, restart. So I guess coming back to this, I guess when I am eligible to the program, Aria is right. I will probably not have control over the ads. I guess I would just take the pennies. Pennies. I'll just take the pennies. Okay, pennies. not the pennies, pennies. Sounds surprisingly similar, especially in Portuguese. Anyway, what am I saying? I'm trying to test what the version migration should look like, because I read this on the Geraint Love's UI library, but I have never actually used this before. And in the case of the auto mixer, we are doing a breaking change, but I think it needs to be a separate plugin because the whole infrastructure of the plugin will be different. You need to use the instances in different ways when compared to my original auto mixer. So there isn't really a point in trying to migrate stuff. Anyway, let's look into the serialize plugin. And this is the old version. All right, so I'm going to save the project. This is the another project. Then I close Reaper, and then let's say that I went to another Reaper project, never opened this project, but I updated repack, got a new version of the plugin, and this new version of the plugin will be version 1.1. Then, or perhaps 2.0, because it's some, no, let's say that it's a new feature, so it's 1.1. It's a minor update. So in that case, we are adding this slider and we are adding this. The version of the plugin that was stored was 100. So again, the serialize block is going to run before the init block. The serialize block will say version is 110. Oh, hang on. Version can be read. In this case, can be read from the Reaper project, and it was 100. So let me update this value to 100. Okay, and then it runs the init section, and then it sees this code. If the version is 100, then perform the migration. So migration will be 1 when I open the project. Then I will save the project again. And this time, version is, it's going to rerun the serialize block in write mode. Version is 110, file var will write 110 into the project. So I will close and reopen Reaper, and then migration will be 0, and it will be forever 0. That's the plan. Let's see if this checks out. So I updated my plugin via repack, so to speak. Now I will reopen my another project, and I should see migration equals 1. Perfect. And then I'm like, okay, I played around with the project, I'm saving, I am closing. Now I am reopening, and this time migration should be 0. It is not. Do I have to play around with these sliders a little bit for this to be picked up? I was trying to avoid the recent projects so that you wouldn't see my list of recently opened projects, but that ship has sailed. No, migration is always 1. And if I check this, then the version is 110. So when executing serialize in write mode, it's not running this line? What's up with that? Oh, no, that's not it. That's not it. Everything worked perfectly, but this is a slider. I am using a slider to see the outputs of the migration. This got saved into the Reaper project, and that's what I am seeing. My whole task is flawed. Let's try this experiment again. This is the old version of the plugin. Close Reaper. Reopen Reaper. And drop the old version of the plugin into the project. Then let's play around with the parameter just for the sake of it and create yet another project. Save and close. Now we are going into repack and updating the plugin to version 110. And I will not set this as a slider, but I can always look at this variable in the debugger. Or I can have this as a slider. I just have to remember to set it to 0. No, let's, yeah, no, okay, that's gonna work. So migration. Yeah, so this time it will always set this to 0, but if I need to do the migration, it will set this to 1. So even if this slider was stored in the project, it will be overwritten at this line. There you go. So this is the new version of the plugin. We should be able to reopen Reaper, open the yet another project, and the migration is equal to 1. Perfect. Then we save the project, close Reaper, reopen Reaper, and migration is 0 this time. So that works great. Oh boy. Now, can we extract this notion of the version into the library? That's the question I want to answer. uBlock Origin and Enhancer for YouTube extensions on Firefox work so well, not so well on Chrome. Maybe that was it. I was on Safari for the most part. For what it's worth, that string gets decoded to that. That's the binary we saw on that decoder online, which is 2.5 float. Wait, what? It should be 100. That doesn't sound right. That should be 100, because that was the version that we stored in that file that we opened in the text editor. Why is that 2.5? Oh, you meant 100 float. Okay, that makes more sense. And yeah, so I guess what we needed was a better base 64 decode into double. But there is no easy way of doing that, is there? Destination, we can only have text. But can we have something like a hexadecimal representation of the number at least? Nope, it always tries to decode that as text. At least this little calculator. Annoying. I would probably have to go to the command line and use Node.js to do this conversion from base64 into a double, because I wanted to go through the steps that you went through. But anyway, I will not do that. And yeah, version was 100 before, so that's what was stored. Great. Now let's try to repeat this exercise, but this time this notion of storing the version will be a function that we declare in the library, or maybe just a function to begin with. I will call this function hello. I really don't want this name to clash with anything. Oh, it clashes with something. I'll call this tail. I already see a problem. Do you see a problem? I see a problem. This variable is local to this function. But I would like for this variable to be global. So I guess I will have to rename this and call it something like the version, and then the global variable receives that, and the global variable is stored. All right, let's see if that works. And let me make sure that this is 100. This is the old version of the library. And when I look at version, I should see 100. That worked. Then I save the project. Then I upgrade. Migration is 0. That did not work. Version is 110. It seems to me as though this line didn't run. Perhaps because it is in a function body. But what's interesting is that this line ran because version is 110. Isn't that something? Did I make a mistake in the process? Maybe. Let's run through this just once, one more time. Because if we cannot have this as a function in the serialized block, let alone in a library, that's a lost cause. Okay, we got back to the quote-unquote old version. Version is 100, so this line ran. And this time version is 100. Oh, I forgot to update. I forgot to update. Okay. Nope. I forgot to update. So let's update this version. Now migration is 1. I probably made a mistake before. And yeah, this is 110, but this is 1. So I probably made a mistake when trying this the first time. But anyway, I can save the project, close, reopen, and we'll see migration equals 0 now. Perfect. And then subsequent runs, same story. It's good that Reaper opens so fast. Yeah. All right, so it is possible to have this in a function. Can we bring this into the library? Now I'm starting to become more confident that we can. And now all we have to do is go through the entire exercise again. Version is 100, that much is right. And running out of fruits. Then let's update the plugin. Migration is 1. Perfect, that works. I forgot to save, I think. Yeah, forgot to save. So let's save and close. And then migration is 0. Perfect. So migration ran only once. Excellent. Now, guess I'm going to call this variable like version.local. Local is a bad name because it's a keyword. Version dot argument. Something like that. Just, I want this variable to be global. That's why I'm doing this handstanding here. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, tail, correct me if I'm wrong, everyone else as well. But I think that there is no way for me to declare this as global. I think that even if I say something like global, that will not work. I don't think that this works. I think that this becomes a local variable. So I have to have this tricky little thing here. But anyway, probably tail is not the best name for this. I will call this serialize, because then it matches what we have, for instance, for block. And then at this point, we are sort of landing on this notion that to use the library, we sort of have to give us a call. Oh, init doesn't have that. So you have to give us a call in the block section, and you have to give us a call in the JSFX section so that we can initialize our things. So it seems like we are arriving at this situation where we want hooks into the different sections of your plugin. For one reason or another, we always need a hook. Oh, and we are following the convention of putting underscores as a namespace in everything in our library. Oh, so there you have it. That's a good way of distinguishing the variable. Kind of huge. Anyway, where should this live? Probably before block, but after the tests. I think that this is the perfect place. So if you want to use our library, you should call serialize with the version number. And this line should also occur here. And I guess I will call this loaded from Reaper project. And this is a global variable that our library provides to you as the user of the library to do migrations. Oh, you know what? Since this variable is a variable, again, that is introduced by the library into the global scope, so perhaps it should have the underscore dot, and this becomes a regular parameter. So now we are saying we receive a version as an argument and we inject that into the global namespace. Same way that we're injecting this, and the same way that we inject all the other variables and functions with the underscore namespace. Perfect. Finally landed on a name I like. Okay. Very nice. So we encapsulated this whole shenanigans into the library so that everyone can use this. The only question remaining is, does it work? Sure hope so. Let's test it. Oh yeah, so Dale is explaining how he did the conversion from the base 64 encoded thing. Yeah, it's a single precision float. Yeah. I remember reading a thread recommended to me by Mage on the Discord chat. If you don't know about the Discord chat, you should go to the link in the description to my website and then from there to Discord. Anyway, Mage pointed out this article on the Reaper forum, and there is a whole discussion about the caveats of JSFX and the edge cases and the tricky little corners. And one of the things is that the sliders are stored by Reaper in the Reaper project for free, but they are stored in 32-bit format, so it's a float. It's not a double, which usually doesn't matter. It's usually okay that you're losing 32 bits. You're losing half of the number, but still it's okay. You're losing half of the precision, not half of the number. But still, it's okay for the most part, but yeah, that's true. And yeah, function arguments are always local. Confirmed. Can you use this dot version equals version within a function to set the global version from the function parameter version? I think so. Well, it wouldn't be global. It would be within the scope of that function definition, because this has meaning in JSFX. This is a keyword in JSFX. So it would be in the namespace of the thing calling the function. So your function would look something like so this is what you're proposing, and then you can call Mage, but you would need to call Mage with some namespace like banana, and then banana version would be that value. So if you're using the this keyword, you're not injecting into the global namespace, you are injecting into the namespace of the place where this function was called. Now, as a special case, if you don't use any namespace, I think that the default is the global namespace, so this happens to work out. But if you're putting the this keyword here, it's bad form to use the this keyword on functions that will be called on the global namespace like that. So I guess you would do something like this. But in our library and in my JSFX in general, I am avoiding the pseudo objects. Anyway, I hope that that captures the essence of your question and answers it. Now let's look at this plugin. Let's migrate it back. And now this isn't like that. See what I'm doing? Again, I'm using the namespace here to differentiate between my version of this and the library's version of that. Cool stuff. So what I have to do is the whole thing yet again. I load serialize into a project. This has not been loaded from a Reaper project. Perfect. So I saved the project. I was blanking on what I needed to do next. Close Reaper and update the plugin to version 1.1. So now what we expect to see is this to be 1 forever and ever. And we expect this to be 1 once and never again. Oh no! Why is that? Migration did not run. You know what's interesting? I went to another program and back, and the value of loaded from Reaper project went back to 0, and that's probably because anytime we hit play, the init section runs again. So if I set this to 1 by hand and hit play, it gets back to 0. So it is good form in our tests to set x to no init to 1. Is that the variable? Yes, that's the variable. And when we do this, we are saying to Reaper, don't run this section anytime I hit play, only run this section once at most when the plugin is loaded for the first time. So all of this is to say, I'm not 100% sure I trust that failure that just occurred. So I'm going to migrate back my plugin. And this is all I need to do. Yes, it is migrated back. And we are going to repeat this exercise because perhaps what happened was the plugin loaded, migration was 1, and then when I clicked here, it ran the init section again. I don't know, it's hard to be sure. And perhaps at this point, we are sort of institutionalizing this x to no init. You're sort of required to have it. At least for this to work. And if that's the case, then maybe it should be in the library. We do have other decisions that we take for you. Like this one. Yeah, I'll make this decision right here for you in the library. Let's see. First, if a library is capable of making this decision for you. Let's see if that is true. So that means I have to open a new Reaper instance, put my plugin on the track. And then what I need to do is set this to 1 and hit play. Okay, a library is capable of setting that variable. That's a lot of power for a library. It changes the whole life cycle of the plugin. Anyway, if you're buying into the library, you better know its side effects. So now we open a new Reaper project just in case, because you never know. Then it has not been loaded from a Reaper project. Okay, save. And the name of this project will be tail. Close Reaper. Reopen Reaper. Reopen the tail project. Oh, I forgot to migrate. But still, loaded from Reaper project is 0. That seems incorrect. Yeah, that variable is 0. Should probably call loaded from project because we are in Reaper. What are you gonna do? Load from a Ableton Live project? What am I doing wrong, folks? Actually, that will work if you do this dot dot version. Yeah, dot dot meaning go up one namespace. So perhaps I explained something wrong. But yeah, you need to do lots of experiments, especially when it comes to pseudo objects. They're very difficult to understand. I guess it's very easy to have a superficial understanding of the pseudo objects. It's very hard to actually grasp what they're doing, especially when you go into, I guess, undocumented features like the star on the parameters when you're passing a pseudo object as an argument. That's really tricky. Anyway, why was this working a moment ago and it's not working anymore? Trying to spot any mistakes. Doesn't seem like I made any mistakes. This is true. Let's update the library. So now what we expect to see is both loaded from project and migration equals to 1. Oh, I forgot to update the number here. They're both 0? This is not working well at all. Why is that? And if I save and reopen, if I close Reaper and reopen, this run version is 0? Hang on, version is a global variable? And there is one reference to it? Oh, here. Yeah, it's underscore dot version now. Okay, that changes everything. It doesn't change the loaded from project, but it changes something. Okay. Oh, I am on the new version of the plugin. I have to downgrade. Oh well. Okay, that all of that checks out. Now let's update the plugin. And it's all zeros. What did I do that made this not work? Guess the only candidate could be the X no init. That's the only thing that changed. Am I right? The only thing I changed since this whole thing was working. Oh no, I forgot to update this number, didn't I? Crap. My test setup is so complex that I cannot reproduce it easily. Should probably have two buffers with the different files to just copy and paste. Anyway. Okay. All of this looks correct. And this is what I want to have in the end. So let's run with this. I ran out of names. What do I have around? I have a pen around. Update this number. Update that. And update that. All looks good. Zero. God damn it. Let's try without this to see if that's the thing to blame. And what is version? Version should be 110. It is, okay. I also have a microphone around. Zero. What? What the hell is happening? What? Did I make an obvious mistake? Yeah, okay, thanks for catching that one. I forgot to change that one that time, but then I remembered and I changed it. So having a serialized section stops variables being zeroed out in init, and x no init equals 1 stops the variables from being zeroed out on transport start and stops. Yeah, the x no init... No, hang on. Having a serialized block stops variables from being zeroed out in subsequent runs of init, not on the first one, because on the first one, the variables are always zeroed out, I think. Yeah, the only thing I changed was to move the function into the library and use the underscore, but yeah. Okay, to finish answering this, x no init, as far as I understand, has the effect of guaranteeing that the init section will run at most once. Because typically the init section will run every time you start playing the project. but with this, init will run only once. When it comes to zeroing out the variables, I think that has to do with the serialize block. If you have a serialized section and you don't set this, init will run multiple times and the variables will not be zeroed out. And if you have a serialized section and you don't have this, if you don't have a serialized section and you don't have this, then the variables will be zeroed out and init will be called multiple times. I think that's what happens. I don't know, it's tricky. Yeah, the only thing I changed was to put the function in the library. I really wanted to wrap this stream up, but now I need to know. Now I need to get to the bottom of this. Strap in, everyone, because we are going to be here a while. Now, what I'm testing is I'm sort of pretending that I'm calling the function, right? Because I copied the body of the function and I set a variable with the name of the argument of the function. So I'm sort of pretending that I'm calling this function. But I inlined the code to see if that's a problem at all. And also, I will not import the library because I think that this gets me back into the working stage. This gets me back into the stage where we will see this working. So that is 0. That's correct. That is 1. That's correct. And I can play. Oh, when I play gets back to 0. Sure. So let's introduce it seems like at some point I considered adding this to the library, because now I am adding this to the library. So with this modification, but no other modification, will it to work? That's the correct approach, yeah. The correct result, not approach. And this is the correct result. And just for the sake of it, here is what happens on subsequent runs. Still fine. So now let's define a, hang on. I did not import the library. So this change did not take effect. Let's try this again by setting this explicitly here. So this last test was equivalent to the previous. I'm becoming faster on this whole restarting thing. Oh, that doesn't work. If you set x to no init, it seems to change the order of execution because the variable version will still be set, but it seems as though when you add the x to no init variable, the init section runs before the serialized section. Well, not even that. It's not even that. It's worse. If you set this variable, it changes the meaning of this. because the serialized section ran. That's why we see this. So the serialized section ran, which means that this also ran. Fine. But this returned 0. So this has an effect on the availability of the file. Really? Or maybe it has an effect on the order of these two blocks. This one doesn't run before init, it runs after. No, if it ran after, this would still be 1 and it's 0. It would still be true, but it's false. If that's the case, my conclusion is that this is beneficial. This is something that we often want in the waveform display plugin, for instance. If you wanted to preserve the waveform display, as I prefer personally, preserve the waveform display as you hit play and stop. If you want that to be true, then you need this. So if you need this to have certain features, then I think that we should have this on the library, and I think that this is not the way we are going to use to distinguish between cases 1 and 8. We will have to find something else. Or maybe we will have to admit that we are unable to distinguish between these two states. Yeah, that is going to be my conclusion, but I want to quadruple check this, so bear with me. If I don't have this, then we try to implement Mage's solution for detecting when you're being loaded from a Reaper project. And that works. But if I have this, and I was considering adding it to the library, and I really think that this is the way to go, because if you don't have this, then it becomes impossible to implement certain features. For instance, it becomes impossible to implement the feature yeah, so there is this feature in which even if you hit play and everything, we never reset this. If you want to implement this feature, then you must set this. But even if you have this, you are always able to detect programmatically that you have hit play and pretend that you are rerunning the init section and reset things yourself. For instance, when I turn on this feature, anytime that I hit play, this resets. So you are always capable of programmatically recreating the effects of not having this. But the other way around, that's not true. If you don't have this, you are doomed. Reaper will reset things and it will set things to 0 again. So I think that, yeah, with all of this logic, this is what we want. We want for this to be in the library. But that means that this will not fly. Yeah, one last time, let's check for this. So if I put, I'm not even going to import the library because that brings its own can of worms. But if I set this to 1, and I don't have to change anything else, because that was the code that was working. So if I set this to 1 and rerun that scenario, yep, it's 0. So yeah, Mage's solution was brilliant, but it does not stand having the external init enabled. For no apparent reason, actually, because the block is running but this was negative. And I am starting to believe that this will also have a consequence on the versioning. Yeah, to hell with this and that and that. And even this. No, I'll let this be for a moment. So what I'm doing now is simply I have to test something else before I let go of this strategy, because Mage pointed something interesting out. Can this interact badly with namespaces? Could that be the problem? Maybe. So let's revert to this version in which I am not using namespaces at all. Okay, I am using a namespace, but because it's separated with an underscore and not a dot, it's not a JSFX namespace. Anyway, without this line, this should work. Okay, this works. Now let's get to what am I testing here even? That. Okay. It's not the namespaces. It really is this. Okay. So now I am ready to let go of Mage's solution because I don't think it interacts well with this and I really want this to be true. Too bad. We'll find some other solution. Next. Let's look at this to see if at least this we can get rid of or we can put in the library. So to test this, what I need is to have this migration variable. Why not? Let's have it. And I will test without namespaces for now. And that's the test. Well, actually, I am on the old version of the plugin, so it doesn't have the migration like that. It's not a migration. Now let's update the plugin. Now it is a migration. Right, that works. And subsequent runs will not be migrations. And they're not. Awesome. Now let's bring in this to see if that affects anything. Naturally, let's downgrade. Oh, I have to remember to update. So change that and that. Huh, it doesn't work. That's not the end of the world though. When it comes to doing the migration, you could always do the migration here. No, how would you do the migration here? Well, I guess you would do the migration here like so. I really want to believe that Geraint Love used this in some of his plugins, so that must work somehow. Yeah, let's see. Old version. And just in case, without this. No, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Is it not reading this? It is reading this. No, hang on. Yeah, it did it skip over this line? What is the value of migration? Why is migration not even a variable? Oh, because it's a slider. Migration is 0. So version was 100. No, version was not 100. Version was 110. I give up. I don't know how the serialized section works. Let's see if you have an answer for me. I'm loving your project names. Yeah, well, maybe serialize is being called twice, the second time for writing. So without that, we have init serialize init. And with, we have init serialize, because init is being called only once, because that might make sense. Well, that does make sense. And also, when I was starting this whole thing, I was going off of the assumption that it would be always serialize and then init. But it seems like it's more init and then serialize. Moreover, by the latest test, I am assuming that the file var situation will only be available on like the block section or something, or the JSFX section, those may have access to file var to this version. Well, not really, because we saw that the version thing was 110, even though it was what was supposed to happen, what I was expecting to happen was for the serialized section to run, this to be 110, this to overwrite to 100, and then for the rest of the execution, it would be 100 until I saved the project, and then this would be 110, and it would be writing 110. So that's what I was expecting. So I was expecting to see 100 here. So it seems like even this whole notion of migration is flawed. Well, at least with respect to external init. If you want to set external init, you will break the notion of versioning and migration. That's the conclusion I'm drawing. I guess the whole execution of the serialized section is absolutely bananas. There is no rhyme and reason to anything that is happening on the serialized section when it comes to the order of execution, or even when it comes to the semantics of the functions. Things like file avail for file availability and file variable, they do whatever depending on whatever other conditions are in place. It really is very crazy. So I guess the conclusion from all this, I will of course think more about this, and for the next stream I may have different answers, but my conclusion so far is this we want. For the reasons I explained, you can always recreate the effect of not having it if you have it, but you cannot go the other way. You cannot have the effect of having it, you cannot recreate the effects of having this if you don't have it. So this is part of the library now, and it will continue to be part of the library. As for the slider function, not the slider function, as for the serialized function, this is incompatible with that we want, so this needs to go away. And this whole notion of version is also incompatible with this, but also this whole notion of version doesn't even work all that well, so let's just get rid of it. And with that, I guess we are going to abandon the migration facility. Perhaps I should ask Geraint more about this, because he may not know more about this, but to be honest, I never used the notion of migration, and the first time I thought about using it is in the AutoMixer, but then for the reasons I explained before, I am not able to, because you have to instantiate the AutoMixer differently, so the migration needs to be manual. When I release the new AutoMixer, it will be AutoMixer 2.0. It will be a different effect, not just a different version of the same effect. I mean, it will show up in the browser as something else. It will show up in the browser as like AutoMixer 2.0, something like that. So in other words, I am abandoning all hope of using the serialized section in a smart way. I will stick to maybe using some file vars that are for the use of the effect, for the use of the audio processing. But I will not try to make it do anything special. I'm going to try to avoid having the serialized section at all costs, actually, since it is so crazy. I would try to maybe shoehorn some things into the sliders. I don't know. That saves the version to the RPP on project save and reads version from RPP on project load if there is a project. What do you mean? How can you... What's the difference between RPP and project? Because I always thought that this was the file that represented the project. I don't understand the comment. Anyway, my conclusion is abandon all hope. There is no solution. All right, that's okay. We will not be able to distinguish between the operation number 1 and operation number 8. But that's all right. We will find a way of making these two diagrams work regardless. It would just have to be a different solution. For example, we can check using gmem. We can put a flag in gmem to say that it has already been initialized. So regardless of whether we are in step 1 or 8, we always try to initialize gmem conditional on finding that variable there, setting on having that flag there. So that's one way of doing it. And then we don't have to do this. It would be very nice to have this distinction. And it is a shame that it is so close to being possible, but whatever, we'll find a way. So with that, I'm going to skip tomorrow because I was here for 2 hours. I was not expecting this to be that complicated. So I'll skip tomorrow, but I will see you on Monday. So thank you to Mage, Tail, Bo, and everyone else who is watching this. You're great. Have a great weekend. I see you back here on Monday. We will continue to explore all this crazy situation that we are exploring. Hopefully with better luck on Monday. And perhaps we will be able to abstract some of this crazy stuff into the library, which will be great because then we don't have to think about it again. Anyway, with that, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye. Thank you for watching the stream. You know how great it has been. Or maybe it sucked, and I am glad that you stuck with me. And soon we'll all be back together for some more coding or talking or chilling. The next time I'll be streaming.